Hello. Welcome to Lastics Live. My name is Emma Scholes. I'm one of the Lastics stretch instructors. And today we are going to be talking about the differences between Lastic stretch and yoga. And this is a subject that I'm really excited to talk about. I actually grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which is a big yoga town. The joke that I like to say is if you grew up in Boulder and you didn't know anything about yoga, they would take your Boulder card away. They were like, nope. So I really grew up doing yoga all the time. It was just sort of part of our town culture and things like that. And then I moved to, I just got away from Trevor. Hello. I moved to New York after growing up doing all of the yoga life. And I found Lastic Stretch by going to Steps on Broadway. And it really changed the way that I approached stretching. And it took me a really long time to figure out why Lastics and yoga felt so different. Because I sort of came in not necessarily thinking all stretch techniques are created equal, because they're very much not. And yoga is not necessarily a stretch technique per se in the way that Lastics is. But I was trying to figure out for a long time why they felt so different for my body. And so today I just wanted to come on and talk about sort of my experience with it and sort of the differences I've noticed. And the other reason is not just that it's just for me, it's to sort of explain maybe to other people who have not had the chance to take one of our classes. I feel, hello, I think I just got away from Marco, hello. And a lot of people, I think, have access to yoga classes in a way that Lastics isn't quite as ubiquitous throughout our society quite yet. So I think that yoga is something that people are very familiar with, whereas Lastics is a little bit less common. And so I find it's good to explain the differences so that if you've done yoga and you like it, or you've done yoga and you're like, not so much for me, then you could maybe come to Lastics, give it a try, and see if it might work a little bit better for you or help you with something that you've been struggling with. And actually, I want to go all the way back to the beginning of both yoga and Lastics. And let's start with yoga. So I'm seeing all these hearts come up. It's really wonderful. You guys are so amazing. I want to go all the way back to the beginning of yoga, and I know that there are so many different derivations of it now. It's completely splintered and fractured in the last, about 50 years into so many different kinds, the different asanas, the different, the meditation, the religion behind it. There's so many different forms of yoga, but I would like to go back all the way to the beginning and look at really where it started. And even if it's very different now, we can't ignore our beginnings. We have to go all the way back to get a good understanding of why things are the way they are. And I wanted to look at the different societies that gave birth to Lastics and yoga. And yoga came out of India about 1,000 years ago, the very beginnings of it, not the more contemporary version, but the very beginnings. And in that culture, people actually don't sit in chairs as much. They usually squat or sit on the floor. In fact, there's even a TikTok challenge going around, I don't know if you all have seen it, where it's only Asian people can keep their heels on the floor and they get their butt all the way to the ground and squat down. I don't know, if that's true for just Asian people or if what exactly it is. But I do think it's very interesting to highlight that there's this prevalence of squatting in a lot of Asian cultures, Eastern Asian, South Asian. You see it a lot, and it's just sort of, it's not like a thing like this is part of our culture. It's just like how we sit in chairs. And that then leads to a different physiological reaction in your body, because when you squat all the way to the floor and you hang out there for hours at a time, not just like, oh, I'm going to stretch for 10 minutes, like that's your MO, that's where you hang out. It opens up your hips and it lengthens your Achilles tendons. And to me, when I started thinking about it that way, that's when it sort of clicked in yoga, because I feel like, at least with my experience, there's a threshold. There's an assumption that you can come in and do certain things in most yoga classes. Of course, there's going to be the really, gentle beginner things. But for most commercial yoga classes we have, there's an expectation of mobility. There are certain poses that most yoga classes do, and if you come in and you don't have that threshold, if you don't have exactly what they're looking for already, the class can be really hard and really frustrating. I've seen that. I've had several conversations with friends of, I try to go to yoga class, I try to do all of the things, but it's just really hard to even drop in and have a good time, because I'm just gripping muscles so much, or everybody around me is so much more flexible than me. It's hard to even just relax into the class. And I think that makes it even more intimidating to go to a class when you feel like you can't even do the beginner things. It's very different than when you get to the end and the big pose at the end is challenging. But even just the very beginning stuff. And our society doesn't prep your body in that way. We all sit in chairs, and when you sit in a chair, you're not opening up your hips. In fact, it can make your hips tighter, it can compress your back, and your Achilles tendons are not involved at all when you sit in a chair. So our society is not preparing us for these certain poses. And I think that is the wonderful thing about Lastics is it came out of it's only about 10 years old. Our founder, Donna Flagg, she developed this technique about 10 years ago. So it's much more contemporary, even than the contemporary yoga foundations when they came out in the 70s and 80s. Lastics is much newer as a form, and instead of coming out of a gymnastics background the way that yoga did, the contemporary yoga, now we're moving forward into contemporary yoga, it came out of dance background. Donna was a wonderful dancer, and then she had an injury and she had to find a way to remobilize her body. And so it's dance, but it's through an injury lens. So there are no assumptions in Lastics. You can walk in, and the thing that's I also feel is lovely is we have all different levels in a class, and everybody walks away with something. There are no poses you have to be able to do. There are no expectations, and that for me, as a very not flexible person actually, has been so welcoming and so wonderful, and actually encouraged me to stretch more, because the other difference that I noticed is, in order to really get a good stretch with yoga, it takes a really long time and a lot of work to find how to twist your hip and really roll it under, or ground your foot at the same time as rolling your hip, and all of these things. And the teacher can say it, but the poses are so big to me. The poses in yoga, I would say, are macro stretches. They're big things that involve your whole body in a very large way. Whereas Lastics is a micro stretch. We still do all of that, roll hip under, ground your feet, all of those things, but we walk you through it in such a way that there's one specific thing in each stretch that we are going for. So for example, if we're going for a hip stretch, we won't also be in a lunge at the same time because we don't want to split your focus from that hip stretch. It's still a strengthening, you're still using your muscles, but your focus isn't split between maintaining your lunge and stretching your hip at the same time. And that allows us to really get in everyone a pinpoint stretch into a micro muscle. And that was such a unique sensation. I had never experienced that. Doing yoga my whole life, there was a yoga club at my high school, it was just sort of part of my everyday life. I took from wonderful teachers, but it was such a unique sensation to walk into Lastics, and on day one, class one, I felt these really specific stretches in very specific places. And some of the moves that we do are really interesting because I've never seen anything like them in any other stretch technique. The main one is we have a lot of, if you're sitting to the side, I'm going to turn to the side so you can see, and we sit up and then we curve back and we stretch back and we open up between the scapulas. I'd never seen that before in a stretch technique. There was lots of back bends in yoga, but most of it was opening up the chest, not opening up the scapulas. And it made a huge difference for me because I had grown up going to school just like everybody else with a backpack. And what would happen with my backpack is I thought I was hunching into my backpack, but the reality is it actually was pulling my shoulders back. And then I would prop the backpack on my lower back and hips. So I actually was always doing this opening, and I actually had really tight upper back. So I got into Lastics, and day one, and I had very little flexibility or mobility, but day one, we went back and my whole back lit up. That's the way I like to describe it. It all lit up because it was the first time that I had a way to get into a position and then add to it in order to really get to those not flexible muscles. And now I've been doing Lastics for almost 3 years. It's completely changed how I do it. And so my biggest thing is that micro stretch that I feel like I got from Lastics. And I feel that it is more catered to my tight places as a contemporary person in 2021. It targets the tight places and the tight stretches. Let me say that again. It targets the tight places with pinpoint stretches. And I feel it immediately. I don't have to go, oh, hello. I think from Casey, hello. I feel like I don't have to work for months in order to get a stretch. And that's the biggest difference. I don't have to build up strength in order to get a stretch. And that's been my experience with yoga versus Lastics is I don't have to build up strength in order to get a stretch. We use the muscles that I already have to balance out the strength and stretch of what I need in my body. So that's sort of my experience with it. We have a few more minutes. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop that into the chat, and I will love to sort of have a little conversation about it and my experience. Yeah, and if anybody would like to talk about anything, but that's sort of my experience. If you've never done Lastics and that this is something you're interested in, we're happy to help you. If you have done Lastics and you have seen sort of the difference, let us know. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have for now. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are here every Thursday at 3, Instagram Live, talking about just our different experiences to help explain, I think just to help explain how special this is, really, to be perfectly honest. I feel like it's a very special technique and it has been so enjoyable, and it's made me want to become more engaged with my body and with the feelings that I have. So that's really why we're here, is to help everybody have that same experience. So yeah, we're here Instagram Live every Thursday at 3. And we have online classes available every day now, or almost every day. It's coming. But definitely all through the week, many different times with fantastic instructors. And if you have any questions, message us, reach out. This is what we love to talk about. So yeah, thank you all so much. And if there's no questions, then I wish you all a wonderful Thursday. Bye. All right, let's see if I can end this.